Suites like this aren't for people who walk in off the street, Heather Collins said, loud enough for the marble lobby to hear. Her eyes moved over the black woman in front of her. The cream blazer, the plain black purse, the printed reservation held carefully in both hands, and her mouth tightened into a smile that had no warmth in it. Before Victoria Blackwell could answer, Heather snatched the paper from the counter and tore it straight down the middle. The sound cracked through the lobby. A couple stopped rolling their luggage. A bellhop froze by the revolving doors. Half the page fluttered to the floor, face up, showing only two clear words, Victoria Blackwell. Victoria bent slowly, picked up the torn corner, and placed it back on the counter. Are you sure this is how your hotel handles a guest dispute? For 1 second, no one moved. The chandelier above them threw gold light across the polished stone. Behind Heather, the hotel's name glowed in bronze letters on the wall, Hotel Blackwell. Heather didn't look at it. She looked only at Victoria, as if the woman's quiet voice had offended her more than anger would have. Don't try to sound educated with me, Heather said. I know exactly what this is. She lifted the other half of the reservation between two red-painted nails. A fake booking, a fake name, and a very bad attempt to get into a presidential suite. Victoria's fingers rested lightly on the counter. Not gripping, not shaking. The torn paper lay beneath her hand like something wounded. Around them, the lobby had begun to change shape. The soft piano music still played near the lounge, but people weren't listening anymore. A businessman lowered his phone. A woman in a silver coat stopped mid-sentence with her husband. Marcus Hill, the young bellhop who had opened the door for Victoria only minutes earlier, took one small step forward, then stopped when Heather's eyes snapped toward him. Marcus, Heather said without turning fully, don't involve yourself. Marcus swallowed. His white gloves hung at his sides. She had a reservation, ma'am. You saw what I tell you you saw. Heather's voice sliced through him. She turned back to Victoria. People come in here every week with printed nonsense. They look up room types online, copy a logo, and think we're stupid. Victoria glanced down at the torn page. The confirmation code is still visible. Heather laughed once. Sharp. Empty. The confirmation code? She tapped the counter with one fingernail. Do you hear yourself? You walk into a 5-star hotel carrying paper like it's 1998. No luggage except that little purse. No driver. No assistant. No card on file that matches your presentation. And you expect me to hand you a key to the most expensive suite in the building. A young man near the check-in rope lifted his phone higher now. Not brave enough to speak, just brave enough to record. Heather noticed and raised her voice even more, performing for the room. For everyone's safety, we verify suspicious bookings, especially when someone clearly doesn't belong in the class of service they're requesting. The word belong settled over the lobby like dust. Victoria looked at Heather, then really looked at her. There was no fear in her face, no pleading, only a stillness so deep it made Heather shift her weight. Suspicious, Victoria repeated softly. Because of the paper, Heather's smile returned. Because of the pattern, a small sound came from the woman in the silver coat. Not a gasp exactly, more like the breath a person takes when they know something is wrong but don't want to be the first one to say it. Heather reached under the counter and pulled out a small bottle of sanitizer, setting it beside the torn reservation. The plastic hit the stone with a clean little click. Here, she said, before you touch anything else. Marcus's face changed. The businessman looked away. The piano kept playing, delicate and useless. Victoria did not touch the sanitizer. She did not step back. She only folded the torn corner once along its crease, smoothing it with the pad of her thumb, like she was preserving evidence instead of defending herself. I like your name, she said. Heather tilted her head. My name, and your position. Heather Collins, front desk lead. She leaned forward. The person asking you to leave. Victoria's eyes flicked, for half a heartbeat, to the small silver nameplate on Heather's jacket. Then to the screen behind the desk, where the reservation system sat open but untouched on the correct search field. A tiny cursor blinked beside an empty box. Heather had never entered the confirmation code. Victoria saw it. Marcus saw her see it. Heather followed Victoria's gaze and quickly closed the screen with one hard tap. The monitor went dark. "We're done here." "You didn't search the code," Victoria said. Not loud, not accusing, just precise. The sentence did something to the air. A man near the elevator stopped pretending not to listen. The young man's phone camera tilted closer. Heather's face flushed beneath her foundation. "I don't need a lecture on procedure from someone trying to scam my hotel." "My hotel." Victoria's eyes moved once more to the bronze letters on the wall. Hotel Blackwell. Something almost like sadness passed across her face, so quickly most people missed it. But Marcus didn't. He saw her look at the name like it belonged to a memory. Heather lifted the torn reservation and ripped it again, smaller this time. The second tear was quieter, crueler. "There," she said, letting the pieces fall into the small brass trash tray beside the keyboard. "No reservation." "No problem." Victoria looked at the tray. For pieces of paper. One still showed the edge of the confirmation number. Another showed the last name, Blackwell, torn clean through the middle. Have you ever watched someone destroy proof and call a policy? Victoria inhaled once. Her shoulders stayed straight. "I'm asking you to verify the booking, and I'm telling you to leave." Heather looked toward the glass entrance and raised 2 fingers. "Ellen." Across the lobby, the security guard near the revolving doors touched his radio and started walking. His shoes made heavy sounds on the marble, each step louder than the last. Marcus bent quickly, as if to rescue one fallen scrap that had missed the tray, but Heather's hand came down over it first. "Don't," she snapped. Victoria's gaze dropped to Heather's hand covering the paper. Beneath her palm, barely visible, the hotel logo and part of Victoria's name pressed against the stone. Then, from behind the darkened monitor, the system gave a single soft beep. Heather stiffened. The blank screen flickered once, just long enough for a blue internal prompt to flash and vanish. "Profile match pending." No one understood what it meant yet. But the lobby went quieter anyway, as Alan reached the counter and Heather pointed at Victoria. "Remove her." The soft beep from the darkened monitor hung in Victoria's ears like a warning bell. Long before Heather's hand covered the torn reservation, long before Alan's shoes began striking the marble, that same small sound had come from Victoria's phone at 5:12 that morning. She had been standing barefoot in her kitchen, holding a chipped white mug with both hands, watching the city wake through a wall of glass. The phone lay beside an old brass name tag on the counter. The tag was scratched almost smooth from age, but one word still showed through the tarnish. Housekeeping. Victoria touched it with her thumb before she touched the screen. 3 new complaints, all from the same lobby, all marked resolved. None of them felt resolved. The apartment was quiet, too polished for the memories it held. On the far wall hung a framed photograph of a much younger Victoria in a Navy maid's uniform, standing outside a half-built hotel with rain in her hair and a mop bucket at her feet. Behind her, steel beams climbed into the gray morning. She had been tired in that photo, underpaid, overlooked, still standing. Under the frame, printed in simple black letters, was the first promise she had ever written for the company she was building. "Every guest enters with dignity." Now that sentence sat inside training manuals, on lobby plaques, in orientation videos, and on the first page of every employee handbook. People could recite it perfectly and still forget what it meant. She opened the first complaint. An elderly man turned away because his jacket was not appropriate for suite check-in. The second, a single mother asked twice for wheelchair access and was told to wait near the service elevator. The third was shorter, written in shaky capital letters. "Front desk made me feel like I was stealing a room I paid for." Victoria read that line twice. Her mug cooled in her hands. Outside, delivery trucks moved along the avenue below. Inside, the old name tag seemed heavier than metal. She knew the feeling behind that complaint. Years ago, in another hotel, a guest had thrown wet towels at her feet and told her not to look him in the eye. When she reported it, her supervisor had said, "Smile. People like us don't get to be offended." Victoria had smiled that day because she needed the job, but something in her had never bowed. She set the mug down, opened the wooden drawer beneath the counter, and took out a plain, printed reservation. Présidentielle Suite. One night. Paid in full. No special notes. No beep escort. No title before her name. Just Victoria Blackwell, black ink on white paper. Under it lay a slim black card in a leather sleeve. She looked at it for a moment, then pushed it deeper into her purse, behind a folded scarf, where no one would see it unless she chose to show it. The point was not to be recognized. The point was to be received. Her phone vibrated again. Trisha's name appeared on the screen. Victoria answered on speaker while she buttoned the same cream blazer she wore whenever she needed to remember where she started. "Please tell me you are not actually doing this alone," Trish said. Victoria looked toward the old photograph. "If I arrive with you, they'll serve the position, not the person. At least let me call Daniel." "No." Victoria slipped the reservation into her purse with the old name tag. "Daniel needs to know what his desk does when nobody important is watching." There was a pause. Trish softened. "You don't have to walk back into that feeling to prove it exists." Victoria's hand rested on the purse clasp. "No, but someone did, and they were ignored." She did not say more. Some wounds became smaller when spoken. Others became sacred when kept. She packed lightly. Purse, phone, reservation, the old name tag wrapped in a handkerchief, and the black card hidden where it belonged. No driver, no assistant, no jewelry except a thin gold bracelet she had bought herself the year the first hotel turned a profit. At the building entrance, the doorman reached for the town car keys. Victoria shook her head. "A cab is fine." He looked confused but nodded. Outside, morning wind moved against her blazer. She watched her reflection in the glass doors for half a second. Calm face, steady hands, a woman dressed well enough to be seen, but not loudly enough to be obeyed. If you have ever been judged by the door you walked through, the clothes you wore, or the job someone imagined you had, you know why Victoria did not turn back. The cab smelled faintly of coffee and vinyl. As it pulled away, her phone buzzed one last time with an automated message from Hotel Blackwell. "Your reservation is confirmed. We look forward to welcoming you." Victoria stared at the word welcoming until the screen dimmed. Then the hotel rose ahead of her, bronze letters catching the morning light, and her hand tightened once around the folded paper in her purse. The cab stopped beneath the bronze letters, but the driver did not unlock the doors right away. He glanced at Victoria in the rearview mirror, then at the glass tower rising over them. "You sure this is the place?" he asked, not cruelly, not kindly, just with the tired certainty of a man who had already decided what kind of passenger belonged at what kind of entrance. Victoria looked past him at Hotel Blackwell's revolving doors. "I'm sure." He hesitated one more second before the locks clicked open. That sound was small, but Victoria heard the judgment inside it. She paid, thanked him, and stepped onto the curb with only her black purse and the folded reservation tucked safely inside. A town car slid in behind the cab. The doorman moved toward it first. He saw the silver-haired couple inside, the polished luggage, the designer garment bag hanging in the back window, and his smile appeared before the door even opened. Victoria stood 3 feet away, waiting. For a moment, she became part of the architecture. Glass, stone, air, invisible. Then a young bellhop crossed the entrance from the luggage cart. He was tall, early 20s, with careful hands and a name tag that read Marcus Hill. He saw Victoria standing there and changed direction immediately. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, opening the inner door with both hands. "Welcome to Hotel Blackwell. Not welcome to the lobby. Not can I help you? Welcome." The word landed differently when it was offered without inspection. Victoria gave him a small smile. "Thank you, Marcus." His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised she had used his name. "Of course, ma'am." Behind them, the doorman laughed loudly at something the silver-haired man said. The couple swept past Victoria without looking at her, perfume and leather drifting behind them. Inside, the lobby smelled of jasmine, polished wood, and expensive coffee. Morning light poured through the high windows and broke across the marble floor in pale gold squares. A pianist played soft jazz near the lounge. At the front desk, Heather Collins was laughing with a man in a navy suit while sliding 2 key cards across the counter. "Mr. Ellison, your preferred corner suite is ready early," she said, voice bright as crystal. And I made sure housekeeping placed the hypoallergenic pillows you liked last time. That's why I come back, the man said. Heather touched her hand to her chest, graceful and practiced. We remember our valued guests. Victoria Pous Bisaida Vrasplante. The old housekeeping name tag inside her purse pressed lightly against her palm through the leather. She watched Heather's smile hold until Mr. Ellison turned away. Then a delivery worker in a faded jacket stepped toward the desk, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper. Heather's face changed before he spoke. Service in trance, she said. The man blinked. It's for a guest. Room, service in trance, Heather repeated, already looking past him. This lobby is for arrivals. The delivery worker's mouth closed. Two guests near the check-in rope watched, then looked away as if the chandelier had suddenly become interesting. Victoria moved before she thought about it. The man had shifted the box awkwardly, and a white envelope slipped from under the twine. It landed near Victoria's shoe. She picked it up and handed it back to him. The guest's name is on the envelope, she said quietly. They'll need that log before it's rerouted. The delivery worker stared at her, grateful and embarrassed. Thank you. Heather's eyes flicked toward Victoria for the first time. Not fully, just enough to register the cream blazer, the modest purse, the absence of luggage. Her gaze cooled. Marcus, who had returned to the door, saw it happen. Victoria stepped into the check-in line behind a young mother, trying to balance a toddler on one hip and a stroller with one broken wheel. The child dropped a stuffed rabbit. It slid across the marble toward the velvet rope. A businessman stepped around it. Victoria bent, picked it up, brushed lint from one floppy ear, and gave it back to the little girl. He almost escaped, Victoria said. The toddler clutched the rabbit and smiled. The mother mouthed thank you, too exhausted to speak. Heather finished with the mother quickly, almost impatiently, sending her toward the elevators without looking up again. Then Victoria approached the counter. Up close, the stone surface was flawless, but Victoria noticed a thin scratch near the left terminal, the kind made by a luggage tag dragged the wrong way. She also noticed the screen behind Heather had the guest search field open, not the reservation verification tab. A small thing, but small things told the truth. Checking in, Heather asked. Yes. Victoria removed the folded paper from her purse and placed it on the counter. Victoria Blackwood, Présidentielle Suite. The name hung there for less than a second. Heather looked down. Her smile twitched. She read it once, then again, but not with recognition. With suspicion, a guest behind Victoria shifted. Someone's phone vibrated. Marcus stopped beside the revolving doors, one gloved hand still resting on the brass handle. Heather lifted the paper between two fingers as if it had arrived damp. Her eyes rose slowly to Victoria's face. Cute, she said. You picked the hotel's name for your fake booking. Heather held the reservation away from the counter, as if the paper itself might contaminate the polished stone. Cute, she said again, letting the words sit between them. You picked the hotel's name for your fake booking. Victoria did not reach for it. She did not raise her voice. She only looked at the screen behind Heather, where the wrong search field was still open, the cursor blinking in a place that would never find what Heather claimed to be checking. That field searches guest history, Victoria said. Not prepaid executive reservations. Heather's smile thinned. Excuse me. You need the verification tab under arrival controls. The confirmation code begins with HBX because it was issued through internal inventory, not a third-party platform. The lobby seemed to breathe once and stop. Marcus, still near the brass door handle, turned his head slightly. Mr. Ellison, halfway to the elevators, slowed down without meaning to. A woman behind the velvet rope lowered her phone from her ear. Heather looked at the paper again. Her red nails tightened on the top edge. You read that on the internet? Victoria's eyes stayed calm. No, one word. Soft. Exact. Somehow it made Heather more uncomfortable than an argument would have. She turned the monitor slightly away from Victoria and clicked twice too fast. The system gave a dull error beep. Red letters flashed for half a second. Invalid search type. Heather stabbed the keyboard again, her jaw flexing. Victoria glanced down at the reservation in Heather's hand. The last 4 digits of the confirmation code are enough to pull the record if the paper was printed from the hotel's internal system. Heather froze for the smallest moment. Too small for most of the lobby. Not too small for Marcus. Not too small for Victoria. Heather's hand moved to cover the bottom corner of the paper where the code was printed. "You are very comfortable telling employees how to do their jobs," Heather said. "I'm asking you to do yours." A suitcase will squeak somewhere behind Victoria. The pianist missed one note near the lounge, then recovered. Heather heard all, and her cheeks warmed. She leaned over the counter, lowering her voice, but not enough to keep the room from hearing. "Let me explain something to you. People who belong in presidential suites don't show up alone with folded paper and instructions." Victoria's fingers brushed the outside of her purse. Inside, beneath the scarf, the old housekeeping name tag pressed against the black card. For one heartbeat, she remembered another desk, another uniform, another woman telling her not to speak unless spoken to. Then she let her hand fall away. "Belonging isn't a room category," she said. Marcus looked down quickly, but the corner of his mouth tightened as if he were holding back agreement. Heather noticed. "Marcus, do you have somewhere to be?" "No, ma'am." "Then stand where bellhops stand." He straightened, wounded but silent. Victoria turned her head, just enough to see him. Not a rescue, not a command, just recognition. Heather snapped the reservation flat against the counter. "All right," she said, suddenly bright, suddenly performative again. "Let's verify your very official internal inventory booking." She typed the name slowly, exaggerating each key press. Vivcidorae. Then Blackwell. The system paused. A small spinning circle appeared beside the search bar. Heather's smile faltered before she caught it. The screen flickered. For a fraction of a second, a blue prompt blinked near the corner. Restricted profile pathway. Heather clicked away from it, so fast the word almost disappeared before anyone else could read it. Almost. Victoria saw it. Marcus saw Victoria see it. The woman behind the velvet rope whispered to her husband. "What did that say?" Heather closed the tab. "System glitch." "You closed the verification screen," Victoria said. "I closed a window that wasn't relevant. It opened because the name triggered a protected pathway." Heather's face hardened. "Careful." The word came out sharper than the lobby expected. A man near the coffee bar looked up from his laptop. The young mother with the toddler pulled her child a little closer. Victoria stayed still. "There should be a manager override before you deny a paid suite." Heather laughed, but now the laugh had edges in it. "A manager override. Listen to you." She lifted the reservation again, higher this time, letting the people behind Victoria see it. A printed sheet, a fancy room type, a name copied from the building, and suddenly she knows our entire system. Victoria said nothing. Heather took that silence as victory. "You know what I think?" She tapped the paper against the counter once. "I think you've done this before." Marcus took a step forward. "Ms. Collins, maybe we should just call Mr. Reed, and I didn't ask you." Heather's eyes never left Victoria. No manager. No Ubedaith. No more little hotel terms. She lowered her voice into something cold and final. "You want to keep pretending you belong here? Phoenix." Then she flattened the reservation with both hands, pinning Victoria's name to the marble, and reached for the center seam. Heather tore the reservation before anyone could stop her. Not one careful tear this time, but a sharp pull down the center that made the paper snap like a dry branch. The sound cut through the lobby. The pianist's hands stopped above the keys. The toddler near the elevators buried her face in her mother's coat. Marcus's shoulders tightened as one half of the page drifted toward the brass footrail, landing face up beneath the glow of the chandelier. Victoria Blackwell's name stared back from the floor. Victoria did not bend for it yet. She watched Heather hold the other half as if it were proof of victory. "There," Heather said. "Now we can stop pretending this is a real reservation." Victoria's face stayed still, but her eyes lowered to the torn paper for one long second. "You destroyed a guest document." Heather gave a bright, brittle laugh. "No, I disposed of fraudulent material." She turned her body slightly so the guests behind Victoria could hear every word. "There's a difference." A man near the coffee bar slowly closed his laptop. The silver-haired couple from the town car stood beside the elevators, no longer pretending to look at the directory. Phones began appearing at chest level, half hidden behind purses, sleeves, and luggage handles. Nobody spoke. That was the part Victoria felt most clearly. Not Heather's insult, not the paper, the silence. The way a room could watch dignity being stripped from a person and still wait for permission to care. Heather reached beneath the desk and pressed a small button. A soft chime sounded near the security station. "Alan," she called, her voice clipped and professional now. "Front desk. Guest disturbance." The words changed the air. Guest became disturbance. Reservation became fraud. A woman became a problem to remove. Alan Price, the security guard by the revolving doors, touched his earpiece and started across the marble. His shoes landed heavy, steady, official. Heather turned back to Victoria. "You were warned. I asked you to verify the booking, and I told you the booking is fake." Heather leaned closer. "You people always think if you say things calmly, it makes them true." Marcus flinched. Victoria's eyes moved to him for half a second, quiet and steady, as if telling him not to carry the insult for her. Then she looked back at Heather. "Run the confirmation code." Heather's smile vanished. "No." "Then call your manager." "No." "Then preserve the document you just destroyed." Heather's jaw worked once. For the first time, her control slipped enough for the room to see effort underneath it. She snatched the fallen half from the floor before Marcus could reach it and slapped both pieces onto the counter. The torn edges did not line up anymore. Victoria's last name was split down the middle, black on one side, while on the other. Heather pushed the pieces toward Victoria with 2 fingers. "Take your arts and crafts project and leave." Alan arrived at the edge of the desk. He was broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a radio clipped to his belt. He looked at Heather first. That was the order of power in the room. Uniform to desk. Desk to guest. Guest to nothing. "Problem?" he asked. Heather did not hesitate. She presented a fake reservation for the presidential suite, refused to leave when asked, and attempted to instruct staff on internal systems. "That's not what happened," Marcus said before he could stop himself. Heather's head turned slowly. "Excuse me." Marcus swallowed. His white gloves curled at his sides. "She asked you to check the code." Heather's eyes narrowed. "You are a bellhop. Do not confuse proximity with authority." The sentence landed harder than a shout. Marcus looked down, but he did not step back. Victoria saw that. So did Alan. So did the woman in the silver coat, who had lowered her phone just enough to watch with her own eyes. Heather opened a small incident window on her terminal and began typing. "Female guest. No valid reservation. Refuses exit. Possible scam attempt." Each word appeared on the screen like a nail driven into wood. Victoria could see the reflection in the black marble. Heather was not just insulting her now. She was building a record. "Do not enter something false into your system," Victoria said. "Or what?" Heather asked. "You'll report me to the hotel you're pretending to book?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. The joke did not get the laugh Heather expected. The system gave a low warning beep. A yellow banner appeared near the top of the incident window. Linked confirmation code available. Heather's fingers stopped above the keyboard. She clicked the banner, closed almost instantly, but not before Marcus saw the first 3 letters beside the code. HBX. The same letters Victoria had said. His eyes dropped to the torn paper on the counter. One corner had curled upward, showing the last 4 digits and the embossed outline of the hotel logo. Heather grabbed the scraps and shoved them into a brass tray beside the monitor. "Enough," she said. "Alan, escort her out." Victoria's hand moved, not toward Heather, not toward her purse, but toward the edge of the tray where one narrow strip of paper had missed Heather's palm. It lay half-hidden under the sanitizer bottle, still showing the confirmation digits. Alan took 1 step closer. Marcus took 1 step too. Heather saw both of them move and slammed her hand down over the strip. Beneath her fingers, the paper crinkled softly. Then the terminal beeped again, sharper this time, and a small verification box opened by itself on the screen. Match found. Manual review required. The verification box opened on Heather's screen like a door she had not meant to unlock. Match found. Manual review required. For 1 second, The words were brighter than the chandelier, sharper than Heather's voice, clear enough for Marcus to see from the edge of the desk and for Alan to stop mid-step. Heather's hand still covered the torn strip of paper beneath the sanitizer bottle. Her fingers pressed down so hard the skin around her knuckles turned pale. "That screen is not relevant," she said. "Too fast. Too loud." Victoria's eyes moved from a monitor to Heather's hand. "The system doesn't request manual review for a document it doesn't recognize." A murmur moved through the lobby, low and uneasy. The woman in the silver coat lowered her phone completely. The businessman near the coffee bar looked from Heather to the brass tray where the scraps lay crumpled together. Even Alan, who had arrived ready to remove a disturbance, hesitated. He knew what a room sounded like when a person was lying and everyone began hearing it at the same time. Heather clicked the X on the verification box. It vanished. Then the system beeped again and reopened the same box, this time with a blinking field beneath it. Enter remaining confirmation digits. The torn strip under Heather's hand had exactly those digits on it. Marcus saw them. Victoria saw him see them. Heather saw both of them. "Do not touch that," she snapped, though nobody had moved yet. "It is hotel property now." Victoria's voice stayed even. "It became hotel property when you tore it." Heather looked up, stung. "I told you what it is. Fraudulent material. Then preserve it. I don't take instructions from you." She lifted the sanitizer bottle with one hand and tried to slide the strip into the brass tray with the other, but the paper stuck slightly to the condensation ring on the marble. The corner curled upward, revealing the final 4 digits and the tiny embossed Hotel Blackwell mark pressed into the paper. Not printed. Embossed. Marcus took in a breath. "That's not copy paper," he said quietly. Heather turned on him. "What did I tell you about speaking?" He swallowed, but this time he did not look down. "Internal reservations print with a raised seal. Regular guests don't know that." The lobby changed again. It was not silence yet. Not the dead silence that comes when truth enters a room. This was the moment before it, when people begin realizing the story they were given may not survive the next sentence. A man behind Victoria whispered. She said internal inventory. Heather's eyes flashed. Everyone needs to stop pretending they understand hotel operations. She grabbed the torn strip. The paper crinkled between her fingers. Victoria did not reach for it. She only said, "If you destroy the remaining digits, you'll be destroying the only thing your own system is requesting. Keep your eyes on that strip of paper, because sometimes the thing someone tries hardest to hide is the first thing that starts telling the truth." Heather laughed, but the sound had lost its shape. "That is adorable. You think a scrap of paper is going to save you." She held it up between 2 fingers for the room to see. This is what scammers do. They find one official-looking detail and build a whole performance around it. Alan shifted beside her. "Miss Collins, maybe we should call Mr. Reed." "I said I have it handled." Heather's voice cracked just enough for the silver-coated woman to notice. The woman's expression changed from discomfort to attention. Heather turned back to the terminal, typed the visible digits from memory, and hit enter with unnecessary force. The screen loaded. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a yellow banner appeared. Confirmation record located. Restricted access. Manager authorization required. It did not say who Victoria was. It did not explain why her name had opened a protected path. It gave the room only enough truth to make Heather's accusation wobble in front of everyone. Marcus looked at Victoria as if he expected her to speak. She did not. She stood with her shoulders straight and her hands folded over the purse that held the old brass housekeeping tag, the hidden black card, and the part of herself she had not brought into the room to be admired. Heather saw the purse. She saw the calm. She hated both. "You know what?" Heather said, reaching across the counter. "Maybe this is why you're so comfortable around service areas and internal systems." Her fingers brushed the edge of Victoria's purse before Victoria calmly moved it back. The movement was small, controlled, final. Heather's smile sharpened. "Let me guess. Housekeeping somewhere. Laundry? Back hallway? Is that where you picked up all these little hotel words?" The old name tag inside Victoria's purse pressed against her palm like a bruise. For the first time all morning, something in her face shifted. Not fear, not anger, but a pain so old it seemed to pass through the lobby without making a sound. Heather leaned in, satisfied she had finally found a softer place to cut. People like you should know the difference between the front desk and the service entrance. The words found the oldest bruise in the room. People like you should know the difference between the front desk and the service entrance. Victoria's hand stayed on her purse, but inside the leather, beneath the folded scarf, her fingers closed around the old brass name tag. The edges had been worn smooth from years of being pinned over a uniform pocket. Housekeeping. Not an insult by itself. Never an insult by itself. But Heather had said it the way certain people always had, as if service was a stain and dignity had a staff entrance. For a moment, the lobby thinned around Victoria. The chandelier blurred into fluorescent light. The marble floor became beige tile polished by tired women before sunrise. She was 23 again, kneeling beside a hotel bed while a guest stood in the doorway and dropped wet towels one by one at her feet. "Don't look at me like that," the man had said. "Just clean it." When she reported him, the supervisor did not ask if she was all right. He only checked the clock and said, "Smile. People like us don't get to be offended." Victoria had smiled that day because rent was due. She had smiled because the job was all she had. She had smiled because every door in that building opened from the other side. But that night, on the bus home, she had written one sentence on the back of her pay stub with a hotel pin. One day, the front door will belong to people who were told to use the back. Now, decades later, Heather Collins stood behind Victoria's own front desk and used the same old wound with newer lipstick. The crowd did not know any of that. They only saw a black woman standing very still while a clerk cut lower than policy ever required. A man near the coffee bar looked away in shame. The silver-coated woman pressed her fingers to her lips. Marcus looked at Victoria, and something in his face said he understood enough. Heather noticed the shift and hated it. "Oh, don't look wounded now," she said. "You were the one who walked in here pretending to be something you're not." Victoria released the name tag inside her purse. Her hand came back empty. "There is nothing wrong with housekeeping," she said. Quiet, level, clear enough for the lobby to hear. "There is something wrong with using it as an insult." Marcus's chin lifted a fraction. Alan's eyes moved from Victoria to Heather. The line did not expose who Victoria was. It exposed what Heather was doing. That made Heather angrier. She snatched the torn reservation scraps from the brass tray and flattened them against the counter with her palm. The raised seal caught the light, but her hand covered most of it. "You want dignity?" she asked. "Then stop making a scene." Victoria looked at the paper under Heather's fingers. "You made the scene when you tore the document. I made a judgment call." "No," Victoria said. "You made a record of yourself." The words landed softly, but they landed. Heather's eyes flicked to the guests holding phones, to the terminal still showing the yellow banner, to Marcus standing too close to the truth. For 1 second, she seemed to realize the room was no longer fully hers. Then she reached for control, the only way she knew how. "Marcus," she said, "come here." He stepped forward slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Heather opened the incident report again and turned the monitor just enough for him to see the blank witness field. "You're going to write that this woman became aggressive when asked to leave." Marcus's face went still. "She didn't." "You're going to write what I tell you to write." Victoria turned toward him. Not sharply, not like an owner, like someone who had once been young, cornered, and dependent on the approval of someone smaller than they seemed. "Marcus," she said, "don't trade the truth for a uniform." The bellhop's throat moved. Heather slammed her hand on the counter. The torn paper jumped beneath her palm. "Enough. You do not coach my staff." "My staff." The words curled through Victoria with a quiet ache. She thought of every orientation manual, every training session, every promise printed under the hotel's logo. She thought of the complaints marked resolved by people who had not listened. She thought of the woman who wrote, "They made me feel like I was stealing a room I paid for." The pain inside her did not make her smaller. It made her stiller. Heather pointed toward the center of the lobby. "Step away from the desk." Alan shifted closer, uncertain now, but still moving, because orders were easier than judgment. "Ma'am," he said, softer than before. "Please." Victoria did not move. "If I step away, the document stays visible. Heather's smile returned, thin and triumphant. Fine. She scooped the torn reservation pieces into her hand and held them up for everyone to see. Then let's make this official. She pressed a button on the desk phone. A chime sounded somewhere behind the frosted glass office wall. "Mr. Reed, front desk," she called, voice bright with false calm. "I have a fraudulent presidential suite claim and a guest refusing security escort." The lobby turned toward the office door as if pulled by a string. Marcus looked sick. Alan stopped moving. Victoria's fingers rested lightly on the old purse, not to open it, not yet, but to remember why she had come. Behind the glass, a shadow rose from a desk. Heather lifted the torn reservation higher, like evidence at a trial, and whispered, "Now everyone will see what you really are." The office door clicked open. Daniel Reed stepped out from behind the frosted glass with a tablet in one hand and the tired expression of a manager who had been pulled from a meeting he expected to control. Heather moved toward him before Victoria could speak, carrying the torn reservation pieces like evidence she had rescued from a crime scene. "Daniel, thank God. She's been escalating for 10 minutes. The word escalating made Marcus blink. Alan's hand hovered near his radio. The lobby leaned in without moving. Heather lowered her voice just enough to sound professional, but not enough to keep the guests from hearing. She presented a fake presidential suite reservation, refused verification, coached my staff, and now she's interfering with security. Victoria stood where she was, centered beneath the chandelier, hands folded over her purse. She did not interrupt. That made Heather's story sound even louder. Daniel looked from Heather to Victoria, then to the phones held at chest height around the lobby. He was a man trained to calm rooms, not to question the person who had called him there. "Ma'am," he said to Victoria, polite but guarded, "I'm Daniel Reed, front office manager. I'm going to ask that everyone keep their voices down." Heather nodded quickly, as if volume had been Victoria's crime. "Of course." Victoria's voice was quiet. "Ask her for the confirmation code." Daniel's eyes shifted to the torn paper in Heather's hand. "Do we have a full code?" Heather answered before the question could become dangerous. "We had a suspicious document. It was damaged during handling." Marcus's face tightened. She tore it. Heather turned sharply. "Marcus!" Daniel raised one hand. "Enough." The command was soft, but it landed on Marcus, not Heather. That was the moment the lobby understood where the system's weight still rested. Marcus stepped back, hurt flashing across his face. Victoria saw it and said nothing. Daniel opened the reservation tool on his tablet. "Ms. Collins, enter what you have." Heather placed the torn pieces on the counter, but kept one strip under her palm. The strip with the final digits. The strip the system had asked for. Victoria's eyes dropped to it, then lifted to Daniel. "All pieces of the document should be preserved." Heather smiled faintly. "You don't get to dictate evidence after presenting fraud." Daniel typed the visible portion of the code. The tablet gave a low beep. A yellow banner appeared, smaller than before. "Record located. Additional authorization required." Daniel frowned. Heather's smile flickered. A guest near the elevator whispered, "Located?" Heather reached over and tapped the screen before Daniel could open the banner. "That happens with corrupted entries," she said quickly. "Old duplicates, test bookings, fake codes. We see it all the time." Daniel did not look convinced, but he did not challenge her in front of the room. That hesitation gave Heather enough oxygen to keep going. "This is exactly why we have discretion at the desk." She turned toward the gathered guests now, making them her jury. "We protect premium guests from people trying to exploit our service standards." The silver-coated woman's eyes narrowed. The businessman near the coffee bar looked at Victoria, not with certainty yet, but with the first trace of doubt about what he had believed. Heather sensed the room slipping and tightened her grip on the narrative. "Alan, please stand by." Alan moved half a step closer to Victoria. Not touching, not yet, but close enough that the space around her shrank. Daniel cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if the booking cannot be verified completely, I'll have to ask you to step away from the front desk while we resolve this." Heather's shoulders relaxed. There it was. Not a victory, but close enough to perform as one. Victoria looked at Daniel. The booking can be verified. She is withholding part of the code. Heather laughed. Listen to this. Now I'm hiding imaginary numbers. She lifted both hands dramatically, but only after sliding the narrow strip beneath the brass tray with her thumb. Marcus saw it disappear. So did the toddler's mother, who suddenly held her child tighter. Daniel missed it because his eyes were on the tablet. The screen dimmed, then flashed another small warning. Access denied. Incomplete credentials. Heather pointed to it immediately. There, the system rejected it. It rejected an incomplete entry, Victoria said. Heather faced the room. No, it rejected her. A few guests shifted. Someone's phone camera zoomed in. Alan's radio crackled softly, an ugly little sound in the beautiful lobby. Daniel exhaled through his nose, caught between protocol and discomfort. Ms. Collins, he said, file the incident report and attach the document fragments. Heather's smile sharpened. Already started. She pulled the incident window back up, the false words still waiting there. Possible scam attempt. Then she turned the monitor just enough for Victoria to see them. Last chance, Heather said. Walk out quietly, and maybe this doesn't follow you. Victoria's hand rested on her purse, over the old brass name tag, and the hidden card she still refused to use. I won't sign a lie. The room went tighter. Heather picked up the torn reservation pieces and held them high, her red nails pinching Victoria's split name under the chandelier light. Then we'll let the record show exactly what you are. Daniel looked down at his tablet, with a warning still blinked. Access denied. Incomplete credentials. Heather leaned toward Alan and said, loud enough for every phone to catch it, prepare to escort her out. Alan's hand moved toward Victoria's elbow, slow enough to seem polite, close enough to make the threat real. Heather watched it happen with the sharp satisfaction of someone who believed the room had finally returned to its proper order. Prepare to escort her out, she repeated, this time with her chin raised. The phones around the lobby lifted higher. The pianist had stopped playing completely now. Without the music, every small sound became louder. The soft hum of the air vents, the crackle of Alan's radio, the whisper of torn paper shifting between Heather's fingers. Victoria did not step back. She looked at Alan's hand, then at his face. Before you touch me, she said quietly, ask yourself whether you are removing a threat or obeying a story. Alan froze, not because he knew who she was. He did not. He froze because nobody had ever made an order feel that heavy before. Heather rolled her eyes. Oh, that is beautiful. Now she's turning this into a speech. She lifted the torn reservation pieces under the chandelier light, pinching them between her red nails so the crowd could see Victoria's split name. Everyone, this is what we deal with at luxury properties. People print things. They borrow names. They learn a few words from the internet. Then they stand in our lobby and accuse trained staff of discrimination when the scam doesn't work. The word scam landed ugly. A few guests looked at Victoria, then away again. Daniel held his tablet at his side, the access denied warning still blinking faintly against the glass. His mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Silence, Victoria thought, was how systems learned to survive themselves. Marcus stepped forward 1 inch. Heather saw it instantly. Not another step. Marcus stopped, his eyes on the brass tray. Beneath its rim, almost hidden, the narrow strip of reservation still showed the last digits Heather had buried. Victoria saw it too, but she did not look long enough to betray him. Heather turned to Daniel. You heard her refuse to leave. Daniel inhaled. I heard her ask for verification. Heather's face hardened, and I verified what I could. The system rejected it. Because the entry was incomplete, Victoria said. Heather snapped toward her. You do not get to rewrite reality just because you speak softly. She slapped the torn pieces down onto the counter, then placed the sanitizer bottle on top of them like a paperweight. The little plastic bottle looked ridiculous and cruel, pinning a woman's dignity beneath a label that said clean. The silver-coated woman made a small sound in her throat. The toddler's mother pulled her child closer. Alan lowered his hand a fraction. Heather noticed the room slipping again, and panic dressed itself as authority. She opened the incident report and turned the screen outward. Fine. Let's make the record public. She read each line aloud as she typed. Subject presented fraudulent presidential suite document. Subject refused to comply with staff instructions. Subject attempted to influence employee witness. Subject became disruptive when denied service. Marcus's voice came out strained. That's false. Heather didn't look at him. Add employee insubordination to my follow-up notes. Marcus went pale. That was when Victoria moved, not toward the car in her purse, not toward Daniel, not toward power. She moved one hand, palm down, between Marcus and the desk, a small gesture telling him not to step in a fire meant for her. Do not punish him for telling the truth, she said. Heather smiled. Truth? You don't own truth in this building. The sentence hung there, enormous in ways Heather could not understand. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the bronze letters on the wall. Hotel Blackwell. Then back to Victoria. Something almost connected in his face, but Heather was already pushing forward. Alan now. Alan took another step. The brass tray scraped softly as Marcus's gloved hand brushed the counter. The hidden strip slid out just enough for the final 4 digits to catch the light. Daniel saw it. So did Heather. For the first time, real fear flashed across her face. Not fear of Victoria, but fear of losing control of the evidence. She lunged for the strip. Marcus got there first, not grabbing it, only placing 2 fingers beside it so it could not disappear again. Mr. Reed, he said, voice shaking, the missing digits. Heather's voice cracked. Move your hand. Daniel did not move toward Marcus. He moved toward the counter. Slowly, the lobby seemed to shrink around the torn paper, the tablet, the strip of digits no bigger than a matchbook. Victoria stayed perfectly still. Heather laughed once, too high. This is absurd. A scrap means nothing. Daniel picked up the strip and entered the 4 digits into his tablet. Heather reached toward him. Daniel, don't validate this. He pressed enter. For one breath, the screen stayed blank. Then the tablet gave a clear, silver chime nobody had heard all morning. The access denied warning vanished. A blue loading bar appeared beneath 2 words, protected profile. Every conversation in the lobby stopped at once. The blue loading bar crawled across Daniel Reed's tablet, and the entire lobby seemed to lean toward it. Protected profile. 2 words, glowing quietly in the middle of the screen, doing what Victoria had never done all morning, raising their voice. Heather's hand hovered near the tablet, but Daniel turned his wrist away before she could touch it. That small movement changed the room. Alan stopped beside Victoria with his hand still half raised. Marcus kept 2 fingers near the torn strip of Reservation, as if guarding something fragile. The phones that had been recording insults now recorded silence. Heather forced a laugh. Protected profile just means the system is being cautious, she said. Daniel, close it. Daniel did not close it. The loading bar moved another inch. The tablet gave a soft pulse, and the front desk monitor behind Heather woke from sleep by itself, mirroring the same protected pathway. The black screen filled with the Hotel Blackwell crest, gold against navy, the kind of image guests saw on room keys and welcome folders without ever thinking about who had built the name. A woman near the elevators whispered, "Why would a fake reservation open that?" No one answered. Heather heard it. Her face tightened. Because she triggered something, she said quickly. People do that. They click things. They create errors. Victoria stood still, one hand resting over her purse, the other relaxed at her side. The torn reservation pieces lay on the counter beneath the sanitizer bottle, beside Daniel's tablet, beside the strip Marcus had saved. For the first time, every object in the room seemed to be facing the same direction, toward the truth. Daniel entered his manager pin. The keypad made 6 tiny clicks. Then the tablet asked for one more step, scan authorized document seal. He looked at the raised mark on the torn paper. Heather saw him looking. No, she said. Too sharp. Too fast. Daniel looked up at her. It's asking for the seal. That document is fraudulent. Then scanning it should reject it. The words left Daniel's mouth before he seemed ready for them. Heather's lips parted. Nothing came out. Marcus carefully slid one torn piece forward, the one with the raised Hotel Blackwell seal still catching the chandelier light. Daniel lifted the tablet over it. The scanner line passed across the paper in a thin blue glow. For a heartbeat, the machine did nothing. Then came a clean, silver chime. Not an error. Not a warning. A chime. The sound traveled through the marble lobby like a dropped pin in a church. The toddler stopped fidgeting in her mother's arms. The businessman near the coffee bar lowered his phone completely. Alan's radio crackled once, then went quiet. Heather stared at the screen as if she could force it to change by refusing to blink. Before that screen finishes loading, ask yourself who is going to be more shocked, the woman who stayed silent, or the clerk who thought silence meant weakness. The tablet shifted to a new page. At the top was the same gold crest. Beneath it, a black header appeared. Executive access record. Daniel's breath caught. Heather reached for the device again. Daniel, I am telling you, this is not necessary. He stepped back from her. Not far, just enough. But in that lobby, it felt like a wall moving. It's already open, he said. His voice had changed. Lower. Careful. The kind of voice people use when they realize a mistake has grown teeth. The front desk monitor mirrored the same record now, large enough for the first row of guests to see shapes, but not details. A line of text loaded, blurred for half a second, then sharpened. Verified reservation holder. Heather seized on it. See? Reservation holder. That's all. That doesn't prove anything except she found a way into. Another line appeared. Internal classification. Restricted executive. Heather stopped speaking. The silence that followed was different from every silence before it. Earlier, people had been afraid to speak. Now they were afraid to breathe too loudly. Daniel's thumb hovered over the next prompt. View link profile. He looked at Victoria for the first time without the guarded politeness of a manager handling a complaint. He looked at her like he was trying to remember a portrait in a conference room, a signature at the bottom of a handbook, a name printed on more than the wall behind him. Victoria did not help him. She did not nod. She did not open her purse. Heather whispered, "Don't." Daniel tapped the prompt. The screen dimmed, then filled with a black and gold profile frame. The first word appeared at the top. Owner. Daniel's face drained of color. The lobby went completely still. Then the next line began to load beneath it, letter by letter, and Daniel looked up at Victoria with his mouth barely open. The next line finished loading one letter at a time. Each character landing harder than Heather's voice had all morning. Victoria Blackwell. Beneath it, in smaller text, the profile completed itself. Owner, Hotel Blackwell Group. For one long second, nobody understood the size of what they were seeing. Then Daniel Reed did. His fingers loosened around the tablet. His face went pale beneath the lobby lights. Ms. Blackwell, he said, barely above a whisper. The name moved through the room before anyone else spoke. Blackwell. The same name split across the torn reservation. The same name shining in bronze letters behind the front desk. The same name Heather had called fake. Heather stared at the monitor, her mouth open, one hand still hovering where she had tried to stop the screen from telling the truth. No, she said, not loudly, not with authority. Just no, like a person refusing the edge of a cliff. Daniel swallowed, then turned the tablet outward. This is Victoria Blackwell. His voice shook once, then steadied because every phone in the lobby was now pointed at him. She is the owner of this hotel. The lobby did not gasp all at once. It changed in layers. Alan stepped back first, his hand dropping away from Victoria as if he had nearly touched fire. Marcus lowered his eyes to the torn paper, then back to Victoria, stunned and ashamed and relieved all at once. The silver-coated woman put one hand over her mouth. The businessman near the coffee bar whispered, "Oh my God." Heather grabbed the counter with both hands. That profile could be old, she said. It could be a system mistake. Daniel looked at her now, really looked at her, and the loyalty that had protected her minutes earlier was gone. It is live executive access. Heather shook her head. I didn't know. Victoria finally opened her purse. Every sound in the lobby seemed to lean toward the small click of the clasp. She did not rush. She moved aside the folded scarf, took out a slim black card in a leather sleeve, and placed it on the marble beside the torn scraps of paper. Gold letters caught the chandelier light. Executive owner. Victoria Blackwell. The card sat next to the reservation Heather had ripped apart, two truths on one counter, one destroyed, one impossible to deny. Heather's eyes dropped to the card. Her face emptied. "I followed procedure," she said quickly. "There were security concerns." Victoria looked at the sanitizer bottle, still pinning one piece of the torn reservation. She lifted it, set it aside, and freed the paper without tearing it further. "Which procedure tells you to rip a guest reservation?" Heather's lips trembled. "I was protecting the hotel." "From whom?" Victoria asked. The question was quiet, but it cut cleaner than anger. Heather looked at Alan, then Daniel, then the guests, searching for someone who still saw her as the person in control. No one stepped toward her. Daniel closed the incident report on the terminal. The false words disappeared from the screen. Possible scam attempt, disruptive, escort required. Marcus exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 10 minutes. Victoria picked up the strip he had saved. "Thank you, Marcus." His eyes widened. "Ma'am, I should have done more." "You told the truth when it could cost you something," Victoria said. "That is not nothing." Heather's breathing became shallow. "Ms. Blackwell, I am so sorry. If I had known who you were." Victoria's eyes lifted to hers. For the first time, Heather went completely silent. "That is exactly the problem," Victoria said. No one moved. Even the revolving doors seemed to pause between turns. Daniel lowered his tablet. "What would you like me to do?" Victoria looked at the torn reservation, then at the lobby full of witnesses, then at the glowing name of the hotel on the wall. Her voice stayed calm. "Pull the lobby footage." Daniel nodded quickly. Victoria continued. "Preserve the incident report before anyone edits it. Save the system logs from this terminal. And bring me every complaint filed against this front desk in the last 6 months." Heather's hand slipped from the counter. Alan looked down. Marcus stood a little straighter. The room had finally understood what Heather had not. Victoria had not been silent because she was powerless. She had been silent because she was watching. Daniel turned toward the back office, tablet clutched in both hands. Behind him, the monitor still displayed the owner profile, bright and undeniable. Victoria placed the torn reservation pieces together as best she could, but the split through her name remained visible. Then she looked at Heather and said, "Now we find out how many people you treated this way when you thought nobody important was watching." Daniel did not run to the back office. He walked quickly, carefully, like a man carrying something fragile and dangerous. The owner profile still glowed on the front desk monitor behind Heather, but nobody was staring at the screen anymore. They were staring at the torn reservation on the marble, at the executive owner card beside it, at Heather Collins standing in the wreckage of her own certainty. Victoria did not raise her voice. That made every word travel farther. "Mr. Reed," she said, "before you pull anything else, disable editing on that incident report." Daniel stopped, turned back, and tapped his tablet with both hands. The terminal behind Heather gave a soft confirmation tone. "Locked," he said. Heather's eyes widened. "Daniel, wait. That report was preliminary." "It is preserved," Victoria said. "Preliminary does not mean invisible." The silver-coated woman nodded once, almost to herself. Alan stood near the counter now, no longer beside Victoria, his hands folded in front of him instead of hovering near his radio. The shift was small, but the lobby felt it. Authority had moved, and it had not needed to shout. Victoria looked at Heather. "You will step away from the desk." Heather's mouth trembled. "Ms. Blackwell, please. I made a mistake." "You made several," Victoria said. "You profiled a guest. You destroyed a reservation. You created a false incident record. You tried to pressure an employee into lying. And when the system contradicted you, you hid the evidence." Heather swallowed hard. "I was trying to protect the brand." Victoria's gaze moved to the bronze letters on the wall. "Hotel Blackwell. The brand is not protected when dignity is optional." Daniel returned from the office with a folder, his tablet, and a look that said the morning had become larger than one employee. "I pulled the complaint dashboard," he said quietly. "There are 12 front desk complaints in the last 6 months, marked resolved." Victoria did not look surprised. That made Daniel look worse. "Were they investigated?" she asked. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Not thoroughly enough. Heather turned on him, desperate now. You signed off on those too. Daniel's face tightened. And I'll answer for that. That answer changed him in the room. Not enough to erase what he had missed, but enough to stop hiding behind it. Victoria turned to Alan. Security footage from this lobby is to be preserved from the moment I entered the doors. Alan nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am. And no guest or employee who recorded this is to be intimidated, approached, or asked to delete anything. His shoulders squared. Understood. Marcus stood near the counter, still pale, still holding himself like a bellhop who expected to be punished for having told the truth. Victoria looked at him. Marcus Hill, you are not to be written up. His eyes lifted. Mom, you will give an honest statement to HR. After that, Mr. Reed will remove you from MS. Collins's reporting line until this review is complete. Daniel nodded. I'll handle it. Heather's breath caught. Review. Victoria looked back at her. Effective immediately, you are suspended from guest-facing duties pending a full investigation. Heather gripped the counter. You're firing me in front of everyone? No, Victoria said. I am refusing to do to you what you try to do to me. The lobby went quiet again, but this silence was different. It was not shock. It was recognition. You will have process. You will have documentation. You will have the chance to respond. That is what dignity looks like when it is inconvenient. Heather's face crumpled, not from relief, but from the terrible understanding that Victoria's restraint made her own cruelty even smaller. Daniel closed the front desk terminal under Heather's login. The screen faded to black, then returned to the Hotel Blackwell crest. Heather removed her name badge with shaking fingers and set it on the counter. The sound it made was tiny. Final. Victoria picked up the torn reservation pieces before anyone could sweep them away. She aligned the edges gently, though the split through her name would never fully disappear. Do not throw this out, she said. Daniel looked at the paper. No, ma'am. Tomorrow morning, every front desk supervisor attends Dignity First retraining. Not a video. Not a checkbox. A room. A conversation. Real complaints. Real witnesses. Daniel nodded again, each nod heavier than the last. Yes, ma'am. Victoria looked across the lobby at the guests who had watched, at the employees who had learned what silence costs, at Marcus standing a little taller now, and reopened every complaint marked resolved by this desk. Heather stared at the marble. The chandeliers still shone. The flowers still smelled sweet. The hotel was still beautiful. But for the first time that morning, beauty was no longer enough. Victoria folded the torn reservation once, carefully, and held it in her hand like evidence of a wound the building itself would now have to answer for. The torn reservation did not go into a file cabinet. It did not disappear into legal paperwork or get buried beneath polite language in an internal report. 2 weeks later, it sat behind glass in the staff training room on the second floor of Hotel Blackwell, mounted in a simple black frame. The paper had been pieced together as carefully as it could be, but the split through Victoria's name remained visible. Black on one side, while on the other, beneath it, engraved on a small brass plate, were the words Victoria had chosen herself. A reservation can be torn. A person's dignity cannot. No one spoke for a long moment when the new front desk supervisor saw it. The room smelled faintly of coffee, fresh paint, and nervousness. Chairs were arranged in a circle instead of rows. No podium. No video playing on mute. No checkbox training. Just people facing one another, the way Victoria had ordered. Daniel Reed sat among them, not at the front. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, a notebook open on his knee. The first page had one sentence written across the top. Listen before you defend the system. He looked thinner than he had that morning in the lobby, humbled in a way that did not ask for sympathy. When his turn came, he stood and faced the room. I missed 12 complaints, he said. His voice did not break, but it carried weight. I called them resolved because the dashboard said resolved. I trusted clean boxes more than uncomfortable people. No one rushed to comfort him. That was not the point anymore. Across the circle, Marcus Hill sat in a navy blazer instead of his bellhop uniform. A new name tag rested on his chest. Guest Experience Supervisor. He still looked surprised by it sometimes, as if kindness had not expected to be promoted. Victoria noticed him touching the edge of the badge with his thumb, the way a person touches proof they are afraid might vanish. After the training, he found her near the hallway window overlooking the lobby. Below them, guests moved across the marble floor. Suitcases rolled. Flowers gleamed. The piano played again, softer now, as if it had learned to leave room for human voices. Ms. Blackwell, Marcus said, "I keep thinking I should have stepped in sooner." Victoria looked through the glass at the front doors. "You stepped in when the truth needed a witness. It didn't feel like enough. Most important things don't feel like enough while we're doing them." He nodded, carrying that with him. In the days that followed, the hotel changed in ways guests could see and ways they couldn't. The complaint line no longer led to a dead inbox. Every denied booking required a second review. Every staff member, from valet to executive office, sat through dignity-first training with real stories, real footage, real consequences. Heather Collins did not return to the front desk. Her case moved through HR, documented, reviewed, answered with the process she had tried to deny Victoria. That mattered to Victoria, not because Heather deserved softness, but because justice without dignity could become another version of the same cruelty wearing better clothes. On Friday morning, rain tapped lightly against the glass canopy outside Hotel Blackwell. Marcus was standing near the entrance when an older woman stepped out of the city bus across the street. She wore a faded green coat, orthopedic shoes, and carried a small overnight bag with one broken zipper. She paused at the edge of the revolving doors, looking up at the bronze letters, as if wondering whether the building had mistaken her for someone else. A new front desk trainee saw her and hesitated, only for a second, long enough for the old world to try to breathe again. Then Marcus crossed the lobby. He opened the door with both hands. "Good morning, ma'am," he said warmly. "Welcome to Hotel Blackwell." The woman's shoulders lowered. "I'm not sure I'm in the right place," she said. Marcus smiled. "Then we'll find out together." From the balcony above, Victoria watched without stepping forward. In her purse, the old brass housekeeping name tag rested beside the executive owner card. One reminded her where she began. The other reminded her what power was for. She looked down at the lobby, where no one was being asked to prove they belonged before being treated like a person. The chandeliers still shone. The marbles still gleamed. The hotel was still beautiful. But now, for the first time in a long time, it was also listening. Victoria turned away from the railing, and behind her, the framed reservation caught the morning light, not as a wound anymore, but as a promise kept.